In the autumn of 1953, Route 47 was just another rural mail route cutting through the backwoods of Cedar County. 26 miles of dirt roads, farmhouses scattered like forgotten promises, and one man who knew every bend, every pothole, every family waiting for news from the outside world. His name was James "Jimmy" Harrison. For 8 years, he'd driven that route 6 days a week, rain or shine. The townspeople could set their clocks by the sound of his mail truck rumbling past their windows at precisely 2:15 in the afternoon. But on October 15, 1953, Jimmy Harrison never made it home, and for 70 years, his disappearance remained one of the county's most haunting mysteries. Until last month, when the drought of 2023 revealed secrets that had been buried beneath Miller's Creek for 7 decades. To understand what happened to Jimmy Harrison, we must first understand the man himself. Born and raised in Cedar County, Jimmy was the son of a wheat farmer who lost everything in the Dust Bowl. The Postal Service offered him stability, a government job with steady pay, and a pension. He was reliable as sunrise. That Jimmy, every morning at 6:30, you'd hear his truck warming up in the driveway. He'd wave to me hanging laundry, tip his hat, and off he'd go. Never missed a day, not even when his wife was sick with pneumonia. Route 47 began at the Cedar County Post Office and wound its way through 26 miles of rural territory. Jimmy's first stop was always the Hendricks farm, then the old schoolhouse, followed by a dozen more scattered addresses before ending at the Millerville General Store. The route typically took him 4.5 hours to complete. Jimmy prided himself on efficiency, but he also knew that for some of his customers, he might be the only person they'd see all week. Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez, now 91, still remembers Jimmy's kindness. My husband was overseas in Korea, and I was alone with 3 little ones. Jimmy would always honk twice when he had a letter from my Henry. He'd wait while I read it, just in case I needed someone to share good news with, or cry with, if the news was bad. But on that October morning in 1953, something was different. Several residents would later tell investigators that Jimmy seemed distracted, checking his watch more frequently than usual. The first sign something was wrong came at 11:47 a.m. Martha Hendricks was expecting Jimmy for his usual first stop, but he never appeared. She assumed he was running late. The post office had been backlogged with catalog orders for the upcoming holiday season, but Jimmy hadn't just been delayed. According to witnesses, he had deviated from his normal route. Old Pete Jacobson saw Jimmy's mail truck heading down Riverside Road around noon. That wasn't part of his route. Never had been. Pete thought it was odd enough to mention it to his wife over lunch. Riverside Road was a seldom-used dirt track that followed Miller's Creek through dense woodland. It eventually connected to the main county highway, but it was known for being treacherous, especially during the rainy season. Why had Jimmy taken this detour? The official investigation would later uncover several theories, but no definitive answers. Weather records from October 15, 1953, show that a sudden thunderstorm struck Cedar County just after noon. What had started as a routine mail delivery was about to become something far more sinister when Jimmy failed to return to the post office by 5 p.m. Postmaster William Crenshaw grew concerned. Jimmy's wife, Dorothy, called just before 6 p.m. to ask if her husband was working late. That's when everyone realized Jimmy Harrison was missing. To all units, we have a missing postal vehicle and driver. Last seen approximately 1,200 hours on Riverside Road. Vehicle is a 1951 Chevrolet mail truck. License Charlie Delta 479. Driver is James Harrison, age 31, brown hair, blue eyes. Sheriff Marcus Webb organized the largest search party in Cedar County history. Volunteers scoured every road, every trail, every creek bed within a 30-mile radius. We walked shoulder to shoulder through those woods for days, checked every ravine, every clearing. We found nothing. It was like Jimmy and that mail truck had just vanished into thin air. The official search continued for 2 weeks. Bloodhounds were brought in from the state capitol. A small airplane surveyed the area from above. Still nothing. On October 30th, 1953, the active search was called off. Jimmy Harrison was declared missing, presumed dead. His wife Dorothy received a widow's pension from the Postal Service. The mail route was assigned to a new carrier. Life moved on. But the mystery remained. Over the decades, numerous theories emerged about Jimmy Harrison's disappearance. Some believed he had abandoned his family to start a new life elsewhere, though those who knew Jimmy insisted this was impossible. Others suspected foul play. The early 1950s were tumultuous times in rural America. Economic pressures, returning veterans struggling with what we now know as PTSD, and social tensions simmering just beneath the surface of small-town life. There were rumors about Jimmy having gambling debts, or maybe he'd gotten involved with the wrong people. But I researched this extensively for my book on Cedar County history. There's no evidence to support any of those theories. The most persistent theory involved the mail itself. Some speculated that Jimmy had been carrying something valuable, perhaps cash or important documents, and had been robbed and killed for it. But postal regulations in 1953 prohibited carriers from transporting large sums of money or valuable items without special authorization. Jimmy's route served mostly rural families who rarely sent or received anything more valuable than family photographs and birthday cards. As years passed, Jimmy's disappearance became local legend. Children dared each other to walk down Riverside Road at night, claiming they could still hear the ghost of his mail truck rattling along the creek bed. The truth, however, was far more mundane and far more tragic. 70 years after Jimmy Harrison's disappearance, the American Midwest experienced one of its worst droughts on record. Rivers that had flowed for generations slowed to a trickle. Reservoirs dropped to historic lows, and Miller's Creek, which wound through the heart of Cedar County, nearly dried up completely. It was on August 12, 2023, that local fisherman David Chen made the discovery that would finally solve the mystery. I was looking for a decent fishing spot, but the creek was so low I could walk across it without getting my boots wet. That's when I saw something metallic reflecting in the mud. At first, I thought it might be an old washing machine or something. But as I got closer, I realized it was the front bumper of a truck. Chen immediately called the Cedar County Sheriff's Department. Within hours, a recovery team was at the scene, carefully excavating what would prove to be a 1951 Chevrolet mail truck, Jimmy Harrison's mail truck. The truck had been perfectly preserved in the creek bed, buried under decades of sediment. It sat upright, as if Jimmy had simply parked it there and walked away. But Jimmy hadn't walked away. His remains were found behind the steering wheel, still wearing his postal uniform and his leather mail satchel across his chest. The position of the truck told the story that investigators had been unable to piece together in 1953. Jimmy's vehicle sat directly in the middle of what had once been a creek crossing, a ford that allowed vehicles to drive through the shallow water to reach the other side. Based on our analysis of the site, we can reconstruct what happened with reasonable certainty. Mr. Harrison was attempting to cross Miller's Creek at the ford that was normally safe to navigate. However, the sudden rainstorm that afternoon had caused the creek to rise rapidly. The evidence suggested that Jimmy had been caught in what hydrologists call a flash flood event. The storm had dumped nearly 3 inches of rain in less than an hour, turning the normally placid Miller's Creek into a raging torrent. Tire marks in the preserved creek bed showed that Jimmy had tried to back out of the crossing, but it was too late. The current had overwhelmed his vehicle, filling the engine compartment and passenger cabin with muddy water. Miller's Creek has a history of dangerous flash floods. The watershed is designed like a funnel. Water from a wide area drains into this narrow creek bed very quickly. In 1953, most people didn't understand how dangerous these crossings could become during heavy rain. The question remained, why had Jimmy been at this remote creek crossing in the first place? The leather mail satchel found with Jimmy's remains had been remarkably well preserved by the anaerobic conditions of the creek bed. When conservation specialists at the State University carefully opened it, they found it still contained dozens of pieces of mail from October 15, 1953. Most of the contents were exactly what you'd expect. Letters from soldiers overseas, birthday cards, business correspondence, and catalog orders for Christmas gifts that would never be delivered. But one item stood out. It was a handwritten letter in a plain envelope, addressed simply to J. Harrison, Mail Route 47. There was no return address, no postmark, suggesting it had been given to Jimmy directly rather than processed through the postal system. The paper was high-quality stationery, expensive for the time period. The handwriting was feminine, educated. The letter itself was, well, it explained everything. The letter was signed, Helen, and dated October 14th, 1953, the day before Jimmy's disappearance. It was a love letter, asking Jimmy to meet her at the old Riverside Road Bridge, where we used to talk when we were young. Helen Morrison had been Jimmy's high school sweetheart. She had married a wealthy businessman from the county seat and moved away after graduation. According to the letter, she had returned to Cedar County to visit her ailing mother and wanted to see Jimmy one last time before I leave again, forever. With the letter as a guide, investigators were able to piece together Jimmy's final hours. He had received Helen's letter during his mail sorting duties on the morning of October 15th. Against his better judgment, and despite his 8-year marriage to Dorothy, he decided to meet his former love. The Riverside Road Bridge was about 2 miles from the creek ford, where Jimmy's truck was found. It appears he was either heading to the meeting or returning from it when he encountered the flash flood. It doesn't excuse what Uncle Jimmy was doing, but it helps us understand he was human. Maybe he was curious about the life he might have lived. Maybe he thought he could just talk to her and put those feelings to rest. We'll never know for sure. Investigators tracked down Helen Morrison, now Helen Patterson, living in a retirement community in Florida. At 91 years old, she clearly remembered writing the letter. I waited at that bridge for 3 hours in the rain. Jimmy never came. I assumed he'd thought better of it, that he'd decided to stay faithful to his wife. I never imagined. I never knew what happened to him. If I had known he was trying to reach me, that he died because of my foolish letter. Helen revealed that she had been going through her own marital difficulties in 1953. Her husband was often away on business, and she felt trapped in a loveless marriage. The visit to see her dying mother had stirred up memories of her youth, of the boy who had loved her before life got complicated. I was selfish. I was lonely. I thought seeing Jimmy might help me remember who I used to be. Instead, I caused the death of a good man who should have lived to see his grandchildren grow up. Dorothy Harrison had remarried in 1961 and had 3 more children with her second husband. She passed away in 1998, never knowing what had happened to Jimmy. Their only child together, Susan, was just 4 years old when her father disappeared. For 70 years, I wondered if my father abandoned us, if he ran away, if he just didn't love us enough to stay. Learning the truth it's complicated. He didn't abandon us, but he also wasn't the perfect man I'd built up in my mind. Susan admits to feeling conflicted about her father's story. On one hand, she's relieved to finally have closure. On the other, she struggles with the knowledge that Jimmy was planning to meet another woman when he died. I've decided to focus on this. My father was trying to get back home when he died. Whatever happened at that bridge, or didn't happen, he was coming back to us. The storm took him before he could make it home, but he was trying to come home. The Harrison family held a proper funeral for Jimmy in September 2023, 70 years after his disappearance. He was buried in the Cedar County Cemetery, next to the plot that Dorothy had saved for him all those years. The discovery of Jimmy Harrison's remains and the truth about his disappearance deeply affected the Cedar County community. Many residents had grown up hearing stories about the missing mail carrier, and the resolution of the mystery felt like the closing of a chapter in local history. Jimmy Harrison represents something that we've lost in modern postal service. He knew every person on his route personally. He cared about them. His death wasn't just the loss of a mail carrier. It was the loss of a connection between the postal service and the community it served. The old Riverside Road Bridge where Helen had waited for Jimmy was washed out in a flood in 1974 and never rebuilt. The ford, where Jimmy's truck was found, has been replaced by a proper bridge with safety railings. Miller's Creek flows freely again after the 2023 drought ended, but local authorities have installed flood warning systems throughout the watershed to prevent future tragedies. Route 47 still exists, though it's been modified over the decades as the rural population has shifted. Modern mail carriers complete the route in climate-controlled vehicles with GPS navigation and radio communication. safety measures that might have saved Jimmy Harrison's life. The story of Jimmy Harrison raises questions that extend far beyond one man's tragic fate. It illuminates the isolation of rural life in 1950s America, the limited communication technology of the era, and the dangerous nature of infrastructure that we now take for granted. Jimmy's story represents thousands of similar tragedies that occurred in rural America during this period. People died in flash floods, in automobile accidents on dangerous roads, in farm accidents, and their deaths often went unwitnessed and unexplained. Modern communication and safety systems have prevented many such tragedies. The case also highlights the importance of understanding natural disasters. Flash flooding remains one of the deadliest weather-related hazards in the United States, killing more people annually than hurricanes, tornadoes, or lightning. Hydrologists now know that small creeks like Miller's Creek can become deadly torrents within minutes during heavy rainfall. Warning systems, improved drainage, and public education have reduced flash flood deaths significantly since the 1950s. But perhaps the most important lesson from Jimmy's story is about the complexity of human nature. He was neither the perfect man his family remembered, nor the faithless husband that some might judge him to be. He was simply human, capable of love, loyalty, curiosity, and error. In the end, the mail that Jimmy Harrison died carrying was finally delivered, 70 years late. Working with the Postal Service, investigators were able to track down family members of most of the original recipients and deliver the long-lost letters. It was an extraordinary moment in postal history. These letters, preserved by tragedy, provided a unique window into American life. They contained ordinary messages, birthday wishes, business correspondence, love letters that became historically significant simply by surviving. One letter, addressed to a young soldier serving in Korea, was finally delivered to his 92-year-old widow. It was a birthday card from his mother, sent just days before the mother's death in 1953. The soldier had never known the card existed. My husband always wondered why his mother didn't send him anything for his birthday that year. He worried that she was angry with him about something. To learn that she had sent a card, that she was thinking of him, it brought me peace about something that had troubled him his whole life. Today, a new generation of mail carriers serves Cedar County. They drive modern vehicles on paved roads, equipped with safety technology that Jimmy Harrison could never have imagined. But they carry on the same essential mission, connecting communities, delivering messages that matter, and serving as a link between people separated by distance. Route 47 remains one of the longest rural routes in the state, covering much of the same territory that Jimmy Harrison traveled in 1953. Current carrier Maria Santos estimates that she serves about 60% of the same addresses that were on Jimmy's original route. I think about Jimmy Harrison sometimes when I'm driving these back roads. The job has changed a lot since his time, but the core mission is the same. We're still bringing people news from the world beyond their front door. We're still the link that connects them to family and friends far away. The Cedar County Historical Society has established the James Harrison Memorial Fund to support rural safety initiatives and to preserve the history of postal service in the region. A small memorial plaque now marks the location where Jimmy's truck was found, honoring not just him but all the rural mail carriers who have served their communities with dedication and courage. Jimmy Harrison's story reminds us that behind every unsolved mystery is a human being, someone who mattered to family and friends, someone whose absence left a hole in the lives of those who loved them. For 70 years, his family wondered what happened to him. For 70 years, his story remained incomplete. The drought of 2023 finally provided the answers they needed, but it also reminded us of something more important, that even in our modern, connected world, people can vanish without a trace. We are not so different from the residents of Cedar County in 1953, hoping for news from loved ones, depending on the dedication of those who connect us to the wider world. On October 15th each year, the Cedar County Post Office flies its flag at half-staff in memory of James Jimmy Harrison, mail carrier, husband, father, and son. A man who died trying to find his way home.